Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Started by a group of citizens in a small Michigan town with a like-minded goal
of increasing the visibility
of the unseen and unheard populations in our community.
Our guests will share stories and insights
with the goal of increasing our awareness and knowledge
of various aspects of diversity and equity
to create a more connected, empathetic, and inclusive community.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
So, let's get to work.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
In this month's episode, we will be joined by Adam Muszynski and Barb Smith as we focus on the topic of suicide and suicide prevention. Our two guests will share their deeply personal experiences along with their expertise in suicide prevention. Adam Muszynski was born and raised in Metro Detroit and is a graduate from Central Michigan University. He currently resides in Saginaw with his wife and two young boys. He describes himself as a mental health warrior, working to end the stigma around mental health and advocate for those who are looking for support by sharing his own experiences. Barb Smith is the founder and executive director of the Barb Smith Suicide Resource and Response Network, recognized at the state and national level for its work in training individuals in suicide prevention and the role played in aftercare for those who have been impacted by suicide. As a survivor of her brother and sister-in-law's suicides, Barb took her lived experience from the past 33 years to help find purpose for her pain. Barb is the facilitator of the local Survivors of Suicide Support Group, coordinator for the local Outreach for Suicide Survivors team, and a victims advocate for the Saginaw County Sheriff's Dept. Well, welcome, Barb and Adam. I'm so happy that you're here with us today, and I'm so excited to learn from both of you. So welcome. And I guess I want to start off today with one of the most basic questions, right? I'd like to learn more about each of you and your backgrounds, what brought you here today, and what gets you out of bed in the morning? What are you passionate about? So I'm going to start with you, Adam. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I currently work at a beer distributorship here locally. Grew up in the Metro Detroit area. Ended up going to school at Central Michigan University, fire up chips. And yeah, met my wife there. I'm a Chippewa, I'm sorry, I'm proud of it. Met my wife there. She actually lived across the hall from me. And we've been together ever since 2007. So we're going on 14, 15 years and got two little boys at home, another one on the way, and excited for life's next adventures.
Well, thank you for being here, Adam. It's so nice to get to know you and excited to hear your story more. Barb, how about yourself? Can you tell us more about yourself? And same questions. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are you passionate about?
Sure. Well, I'm first a mom, sister, friend, as well as a wife, and as being a survivor of my brother John's suicide, and which led me to my work today as a suicide prevention aftercare specialist. So I'm passionate about making an impact in the world that I live in. So every day I get out of bed thinking how can we impact this world that we're living in and not being part of the problem, but part of the solution of bringing a safe place. So living in a place it's fun to be in.
Well, thank you for being here today, Barb. And yeah, I'm so excited to hear more about the work that you do. And I know it impacts so much in our community and further than that too. So as we start out today, though, I think it's really important to start off with some definitions and some terminologies from when we discuss this. So I'm going to ask Barb, you to touch base on this one. Can you teach us more a little about the correct terminology to use when discussing suicide prevention?
I love that question because I think that's what makes people feel more comfortable about the open conversation, right? Like, do I say that? Do I not say that? So it's really about words that are more helpful and hopeful and not as hurtful. So, and we're learning, as the time goes on, Jeremiah, we're really learning what does commit suicide mean? So formally we use people commit suicide, but when we think about commit, it's really about committing a crime, right? It's often associated with a crime, and that people that die by suicide did not commit a crime. So we're really introducing new language that would be more sensitive. Someone died by suicide. It was a suicide death. or someone attempted suicide, or they had a lived experience, they had behavior related to suicide, that would be attempt. So when we think about the introduction of the word commit, if my brother died by suicide, it's really how he died. It was his cause of death. My other brother died from cancer. His cause of death, he didn't commit cancer, he died from cancer. So if you think about the language is about how did they die, right? And so just even getting used to it, it's not a bad thing. It's just the way that, we've grown up in the past. But I think our intention is never to hurt anyone. And I always tell families, if I say something that hurts you, just teach me what I could say or do differently. So simple: suicide, death, died by suicide, ended their life, took their life. People who attempted, they didn't fail, because if someone attempts suicide, we call that as an opportunity to now help them. I didn't know suicide was on your mind, so let's use this as an opportunity to help support you in life. So it's not a failed attempt at all. It was a behavior reacting to their pain.
It really is like a mindset shift, right? As we use different terminologies, as we learn and grow and think about these differently. So, and that's part of the reason you're here today, is to help myself and our listeners know more about that. So thank you, Barb. I'm going to pass it off now to Adam. Adam, I really want to hear more about Barb's organization and the great work that she does. But first, I'd like to start with you and hear more about your personal story. So I'm going to start there, and I'm going to pass it off to you to tell us more about your personal story related to our topic today.
Thank you. I'll set the stage for you here real quick. I was 30 years old, married to my college sweetheart at that time for a little over 10 years, had a 2-year-old at home, another one on the way, a job I love, a house, everything going good, looking from the outside in. It was in 2018, in that fall season, where I started feeling like depressed and lonely, and I felt this cloud over me and this weight on my shoulders. I didn't admit it to myself. I didn't know what was going on. Looking back on it, it's like, oh wow, like it definitely was something that I needed to talk about then. I had suicidal thoughts when I was going through a rough day at work or a rough day at home, or the kids aren't going to bed at the right time or anything like that. It was tough on me mentally. And then the following spring, I had my first breakdown. I came home from getting pizza. I probably stayed at work a little too late. The kids weren't behaving, and I just absolutely lost it. I broke down. My wife's like, "What's going on?" And for the first time in like the last 6 to 9 months, I legitimately said, I have thoughts of killing myself. I do not want to be here right now. And it was really odd, but just saying that, I was bawling, I was hyperventilating. She gave me a hug and she said, "It's okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to get through this." And at that point, I just felt a weight just off my shoulders. And it was one of the hardest things I ever did. I wish it did not have to come down to me literally breaking down in front of my kids, hyperventilating and basically losing all control. But it's what led me on the path to Barb and on the path to getting better and getting through this. The problem was, after that happened, I talked to Barb, same thing. It was nice admitting it, getting it off my chest, off my shoulders, feeling a lot better of myself. I didn't take it as seriously as I should have. And that's something that I want to tell like the listeners, is this is something that you need to take seriously. Because I started going to a therapist. Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. No problems. My wife would talk to me. Hey, how's it going? I'm good. And that was it. And then I broke down again. That was like a month later. This one, I was trying to get out of the house, trying to get to the garage. I couldn't control what I was doing. And at this point, my wife, I think we were up to like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. I called one of my friends, hysterical, crying that he knew what I was going through. He was able to help me a lot. And the next morning I wake up, my wife tells me, she goes, "Go to work. Do not come home until after 3 o'clock. I was like, okay, that shouldn't be an issue. Like, no big deal. I came home, didn't even realize what had happened at that point. So my wife called Barb, and together they removed all the methods that were tempting me. We got a gigantic box and it's all gone. And at first I was like, oh shit, like this is not good. And I was a little upset about it, but looking back on it, it just shows how much Barb cares and how much my wife actually loves me. Is they were willing to, like, hey, you go to work, you be safe. We know you can do that. Then we're going to go here and we're going to clean everything out because we need you to get better and we need you here. And that's the toughest thing to think about, is not being there for my kids. And every time I talk about, like, I told Barb this the other day, every time I love talking about it, it's emotional for me, but people need to understand that it can happen to anybody, and it's okay not to be okay. So after that spring period, I started seeing a different therapist. I admitted to my wife, like, hey, I'm not being completely honest with my therapist. I need to get on antidepressants. I was a little hesitant about doing that. And then I started seeing another therapist, completely honest with myself, completely honest with Melanie. Our conversations were no longer, how are you? Oh, I'm good. It was, how are you? You know, I had a bad day. You know, some things went wrong. And working through the antidepressants, and Barb can talk to this too, I was nervous about going in to talk to my doctor and then being like, oh, well, here's this. Take it at however many milligrams and be happy. I didn't want to feel that drugged feeling. And that's why I was very hesitant at first. There is a test that can go and swab like your mouth or your nose, kind of like one of the COVID tests basically nowadays. They can swab that. They send it in. Depending on your insurance, they'll pay for it or whatever. And it'll come back and it'll give you a list of all the antidepressants and which ones they think, according to your DNA, work the best. It's not always 100%, but it's something that, okay, cool, that eliminates half the guesswork right there. And the one came up, I dialed it into my prescription and it started working. And it was great. And from that point, it was working on myself, being honest with myself, being honest with my feelings, working on my personal growth and understanding what I was actually going through. And I continued to see a therapist actually right before the pandemic started, was I think right as I stopped. And then the pandemic started and a doctor calls me. He's like, all right, well, you've been on this for about a year. What do you think? I'm like, I'm not coming off of it, man. Like, these are unknown times. Like, I'm not taking that chance. I know what my mind was doing a year and a half ago. Like, I'll stay on them and keep going through. But since then, now this past summer in 2021, I actually was able to wean off of them and everything. And that was an interesting experience. Definitely, though, it was worth it, 100%. I still have days where I don't feel fantastic. There was a day where I just wanted to lay on the couch. So I laid on the couch. But the thing I go through is just multiple victories. It's getting through, okay, cool. I got to noon. I got to 6 p.m. I got to bedtime. I woke up the next morning. And then we just do it again and again and again. And it's breaking down the feeling of overwhelmed and cloudiness as this gigantic thing above you, where it's, no, if I can do this one little thing, I can win this hour. And all those victories add up to the ultimate victory of, you're still here. And that's key.
Well, Adam, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for the courage to share your story, both to me and to all our listeners. I know, to your point, it can and does happen to really anyone, and I'm sure there's listeners going through similar struggles. So your courage to share your story is really impactful. So thank you for that. And today, as we continue today, I would love to hear more from Barb too about those who are going through similar situations as to Adam. How can we do what help can they get, and how can we move forward? So with that, I want to pass it off to you, Barb. Can you tell us more about the Barb Smith Suicide Resource and Response Network? And then, and with that too, I know tell us about the organization, and can you tell us about your motivation to pursue this work and why it's so important to you?
Sure. I started this grassroots organization. We call it Grassroots because it started from a personal experience where my brother John took his life at the age of 20. So we've been in existence for 34 years. We started here in Saginaw County as a support group, and we are now recognized state and nationally as suicide prevention and aftercare specialists. So it really started by myself making a decision that I needed to find purpose for my pain. So at this point, our mission is to bring education and awareness around suicide to help prevent suicide. We also are connectors, so we help people connect to resources. And then our aftercare is we care for anyone who's been impacted by death to suicide. So it's prevention, intervention, and aftercare services.
Thank you so much, Barb. This is so impactful. And I will say that some of the trainings, I did go through one of your trainings once through them, and it just so important. And I would just, and as we're going to learn more today, I would encourage everyone to reach out if they're wanting to learn more, because it really can save a life. Thank you so much. So as we move forward a little bit, so can we talk a little bit about, I think there are a lot of myths and misconceptions. I know we started out today talking about definitions, because people have, society has taught us how we say things and how we articulate things, and also how we view suicide and suicide prevention. So I guess, can we start off with, what are some common myths and misconceptions regarding suicide and suicide prevention?
One of the greatest myths is that if we talk about it, it's going to put the idea in someone's head. And Jeremiah, that is like the furthest from the facts and the truth, that if we talk about mental illness and we talk about thoughts of suicide, then we're going to remove the stigma and the shame that's oftentimes affiliated with it. You know, as Adam said a little bit ago, it's like he wasn't totally honest with his wife and his therapist because that shame and the guilt. And, we hear him talking about he had a wonderful wife and family, and I don't want to do this to my kids. And that oftentimes was our conversation is, I can't believe I would think about doing that. And it's very shameful as a husband and a father. So if we allow people to understand and to validate, a lot of people have thoughts of suicide. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or weak. It just means you have a thought. And we don't want you to act on that thought. Like, what else can you do when those thoughts come to your mind? So number one is getting through that cumbersome part of it. I don't want to talk about it, both for the person that has a concern, but also for that person with thoughts. We oftentimes think that we can't help prevent a suicide, that if that person wants to do it, they will. That can be the case in very few cases, right? Situations. But we know that almost all suicides can be prevented if we know what to look for and how to respond. But it takes two people. It takes the person with the thoughts, and it takes the helper to be supportive. So we do know that almost all suicides can be prevented. And I think our biggest issue that we have in society now is everyone, if someone's having a thought, they need to go to the behavioral health, they need to go to their primary care. But most often we just want to talk to someone. And as Adam said, once I talked to my wife about it, talked to Barb, talked to my therapist, it relieved a lot of that pressure. And so that myth that only specialists can help you isn't always true. They can be an addition to, but it's almost always your family and friends first.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, Adam, when you mentioned that, I could see, I know our listeners can't, we're recording on video, so I could see the relief on your face even now about being able to express that, that to your wife and just talking to somebody. So thank you.
To this day, like I've shared my story with a couple other people and close friends and everything, and it's not always the easiest thing to do, but to me, it's the best therapy, is talking about it and talking about my story. And it helps other people too, realizing, hey, I'm not alone in this. People that are having the same thoughts that I had at one point, and me bringing it up and what I went through. And they're just like, you can see, like, had a friend I talked to about it this past summer at a bonfire, just randomly brought it up. And I told her my story, and she's just like looking at me like, whoa, I'm not alone. That's me. And I'm like, exactly. Like, and guess what? It's okay. We're all going to be okay. And that's the thing I try and tell as many people I can, just talk about it, be honest, and talk about it with whoever will listen. And if someone's talking to you about it, listen and take that in and digest it and understand it, because it was hard for them to say that.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about this, whether there's these thoughts, but other people maybe they have severe depression, and self-harm is also another issue. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's the difference between like suicidal thoughts and severe depression with self-harm, and maybe what differentiates these?
Well, I think self-harm is different than suicide, although self-harm could be that lead into somebody struggling mentally, emotionally, and then it could lead to suicide if we don't meet their needs. But suicide oftentimes is about ending your pain and feeling that emptiness, and self-harm is wanting to feel something. And when does self-harm become that step towards suicide? So if someone is self-harming, and we ask that question, are you thinking of harming yourself? Asking about, do you want to harm yourself, is a lot different than asking someone if they want to die, right? So if a person is comfortable asking more to soften that question of, are you thinking of harming yourself, or do you harm yourself? If they say yes or no, just say, okay. And my next question would be, have you had thoughts of suicide? You always have to ask both of those questions. And if they are self-harming, they might not have thoughts of suicide, but we need to address the self-harm. And more males self-harm than we actually knew in previous. So there's studies showing that males self-harm almost equally as much as our females, if not a little more. They just hide it differently. So I feel like we don't ask our males about harming themselves as much as we should. And always clarify, okay, no, you're not harming yourself, but are you having thoughts of suicide? Because one could lead to the next. And you said it beautifully. A lot of people have thoughts of suicide, or people do. It doesn't mean they have to act on them. And to tell someone don't do that is like taking away a thought without figuring out why those thoughts came to the mind in the first place.
Thank you so much, Barb, for clarifying that. So when you talked about prevention too, we want to talk maybe about warning signs or helping, somebody who is concerned. So maybe what are some warning signs, and maybe that's not the right term, but warning signs or signals or things that might go unnoticed to many people, and maybe that's something that then you want to bring up and to ask that difficult question: are you having these suicidal thoughts? Because asking that explicitly is so at what stage and what flags should maybe you then bring those up if you're concerned?
I think they can be little flags. I think we think about suicide as being this big dynamic change, like, oh, that person's just saying it out loud, or they're totally drinking all the time. It can be very small, subtle behavior changes. So always look at it as a behavior change. Okay, so it could be someone who's very outgoing becomes isolated, or someone who is isolated now becomes very open and jovial. Someone who drinks a little but is drinking more. So increased alcohol, substance use, sleeping changes, eating changes, saying little things like, my family better off without me, or I hurt everybody I love, or life just gets hard. No matter how hard I try, it just won't work out, which is hopelessness, right? They feel a failure. But it doesn't have to be a big change. It could be somebody who walks their dog every morning at 6 o'clock. They stop walking their dog. Is it because they don't have energy to get out? Or frankly, they don't have energy to care for that pet that they've loved so much and dedicated to? So they might be able to take care of their children, but they don't have any energy left to take care of their pet. So a behavior change for that individual. They used to cut their grass and it was always perfect, the straight lines. And now it's just like the grass isn't growing, or it's growing, erratically, or they're not as perfectionist about their lawn because it doesn't matter anymore. So something simple like, Jeremiah, I've noticed, we've been neighbors for 20 years. I've never noticed your lawn not to be manicured. And I know you're struggling with your family right now. You lost someone in your life. And I'm just checking in to see where you're at. So I use the word checking in instead of saying how you feeling, because Adam would say, good, good. Right. So I just say, I'm just checking in and where you're at right now with life. What's the hardest part about life right now? And then they'll just like, I just feel like I can't take this anymore. So, and then I'll just come back and say, so when you said that, can't take it anymore, are you talking about suicide? So that leading question of checking in gives you the opportunity to turn the behavior around to ask about suicide.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that that's great, that checking in to lead to that explicit ask of, are you having that suicidal thoughts? Is there a time then, like, for people who are having these thoughts and are confused about where maybe they're going down a darker road, how can people tell if they're just feeling down, if they're severely depressed, or there's maybe something more serious that they should be concerned about for themselves and haven't really had somebody approach them about it yet? So what would I guess this is for both for Adam and Barb, in those situations, what would be the advice to somebody who's maybe confused about where their thoughts are and just know that they're not in a great place right now?
Adam, I'll plug in, and then of course, if you want to, tag on to it. But I think when that person, like after my mom died, I just had grief. I didn't want to get off the couch. I wanted my mom. I was sad, and it was COVID, and I was lonely. That was grief. But then when it becomes much longer and you don't want to get out of bed, nothing is important anymore. How can I die to be with my mom? Like, there's a part even in death, like, I just want to die because I don't want to hurt anymore. And then there's almost that next level of, how could I die so I don't have to be here anymore? It's almost that next level of, and I talked to a gentleman about 2 months ago, and his daughter had attempted suicide. And he said, I don't understand why she would do that. And he said, I think about suicide every day, but I would never do it. And I said, well, you do think about suicide every day. I said, have you ever told anybody that before? And he goes, well, no. He said, doesn't everybody? And I said, actually, no, a lot of people do, but not everyone. And he said, really? He said, I think about this for the past 20 years. So for some people, Jeremiah, it's a thought, but it doesn't become an action. So when that depression becomes a quality of life concern, you don't enjoy your kids, your family, your job. Adam said it beautifully. He said it's like he walked around and there was like a cloud always over his head, even when he was smiling and laughing and there, it's the cloud that hovered over him. And then that thought of suicide came when he was driving alone. But then when he started to visualize how that would happen, then that became that next step. So we want people to talk about it before that thought has to come to suicide. And it's common to have a thought of suicide, but it doesn't have to be that thought that you have to keep within yourself.
Great. Adam, do you have any other thoughts on this? Having, based on your lived experiences as well?
Yeah, I would just say to anyone out there that's hurting, or if you think someone else, you need to be truthful, is 100%. Because when my story first began, and I first told them, I still wasn't 100% truthful. And that's something that I have worked on through across all aspects of my life and take it very seriously now, is you need to be true with how you're feeling and yourself. And if you're not feeling good one day, if you're having bad thoughts, just say it. Because you know what? Because then you got two people. If I call my wife, hey, or I text her, hey, I'm not feeling good. I'm just having a bad day. My mind's all cloudy and I can't get motivated. Well, great. Well, she can help me then. But if I don't ever tell her that, how is she going to help me? And if she asks and I just say, I'm good, I'm fine. That was another rule like we created. Like we have these like nightly chats. We don't do them as often anymore. We're busy, but when we do them and ask, oh, how are you? If one of us says fine or good, we're like, oh, that's not the answer.
Right.
Like, try again.
I always joke, there's the two questions that you're always going to get the same answers to. If you ask somebody, how are you? It's going to be fine or good. And if you ask somebody, do you understand? The answer is always going to be yes, because nobody wants to say no, right?
Right.
Or nobody wants to say
like,
I'm bad, right?
We're so used to passing people in the hallway. Oh, what's up? Oh, nothing. How are you? Good. That's it. But that shouldn't be part of our daily lives. That shouldn't be people that we are connecting to emotionally. Is that we need to connect with them emotionally and give them what we're feeling and what's in our hearts and our minds.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. So if we start to be concerned about somebody, I want to talk a little bit about ways, tangible ways that people can help when maybe they're concerned about somebody's having suicidal thoughts. We've already touched on this a little bit, and Barb, you gave some great examples about how to do that by, checking in and then leading to those. But can you maybe both talk us through what are some really tangible ways people can help if they're concerned about somebody? Maybe starting from like Barb, what you were saying about checking in with others, but is there other things that we can be doing?
Sure. I would definitely, when you ask that question, how would someone know if it's beyond the depression or, suicide thoughts? There's a website called mantherapy.org. It's really focused on men. It's a little creative. They developed Dr. Mahogany to just bring males into this conversation. You do a 20-point inspection. There's a little humor to it. So if you're in that space where you're not ready for humor, then it's not the place to do this. But if you have humor a little bit, just go in. And even if you're doing well right now, take the 20-point inspection. It's a self-evaluation. If you score high, it'll tell you and recommend that you might need outside help, or you could call this number. So that's called mantherapy.org. There's other websites online that you can do a self-assessment, just to check in with yourself. If someone's telling you, man, something's not right with you, you've been really angry lately, you're drinking more, you're not hanging out with me and the kids. Every time you leave work, you come back and sit in the garage by yourself or in the basement. There's something going on. And if the person's in a little resentful or resistant, I guess I would just say, you know what, why don't you just take this and see what it says? Talk to your primary care doctor. Talk to someone, EAP. EAP is a great resource, Jeremiah, and most people have that through their work, employee assistance program. Finding a good therapist if you have been diagnosed with depression, bipolar, any other type of mental health issues. Find a good therapist who understands mental illness, who does CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, or DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. Both of them have been very effective, and it teaches you how to redirect your thinking and how to keep yourself in a healthy way, in a mindset. Those are very simple things to do. Music is important. Taking time to get away from your electronics, that has probably been our biggest barrier with communication. It's easy to check out by going to your electronics, and then you are losing that lack of communication and connection. That, and number one, that they're saying around the country, has been one of our biggest challenges, is connecting with others and connecting to ourselves. I would challenge every listener, shut off your electronics for at least, the small increments, 15 minutes if you can. An hour is amazing. We find that the rates of our kids are going up for anxiety, depression right now, 50% more for our young girls. If we don't start reconnecting with ourselves, we won't be able to reconnect with our own families. So sleeping, exercise, reconnecting, and then when you need to go for extra help, find a good therapist that can do the CBT, DBT, or
Wonderful.
just
Adam, I'm going to put you on spot a little bit, because when Barb was talking about the disconnecting from electronics, I could see your head vigorously nodding here. So can you tell me what your thoughts were going through it, like when she was explaining this?
Yeah, so I had all the social media accounts and was on them and active on them and constantly checking my phone. And when going through this journey I went from 3 or 4 pages of apps to 1. I turned off notifications. I was like, why do I care what's going on in, I don't know, the middle of Ireland on a Tuesday?
Right.
Like it does not affect me at all. So I went through and I still I have 1 page of apps and I will not have more. That's my rule.
There you go.
I have 1, and it's like, whether I have Instagram as my only social media account, but it's huge to get that off of you, because we're so stimulated by it and we're so addicted to it. We're so used to going on our phone and texting and this and that, you forget how to actually have a face-to-face conversation with somebody.
And it doesn't help, does it, getting on a phone and lacking that?
No,
that's the
exactly.
face-to-face.
It's hard enough going through Zoom. Like, these are weird sometimes. Like, I was on 3 Zoom meetings this morning. It's like, at some point they are weird, but it's the time we live in. But it's better than texting back and forth or messaging on Instagram or Facebook or wherever.
But that goes through, you guys, like, no one has to tough it out alone. And I think when we hide behind our screens, you can hide, how are you? I'm good, I'm smiling. When someone is sitting in front of you, and we have to go back to building relationships, Jeremiah, we are losing our kids. Our parents, us parents, have a responsibility to check in ourselves. Thank God Adam shared and talked about it with his wife. And maybe if your wife or partner are not as supportive, maybe you're struggling in your marriage, find another adult or family member that you can talk to. It's not always your partners, it's not always the parent, but it's important to find someone else that you can have that honest conversation with and open it up for discussion, because we've got to stop, Jeremiah, of hiding behind these masks because people are dying alone. Alcohol, substance use, domestics. I don't want to be gloom and doom, but we have the opportunity to tell parents, how much time are you on social media talking and worried about everything else? And how much time are you literally sitting in front of your own kids and talking to them? That's my challenge to everyone. Find out what you could do differently and better in your own homes, and then start giving yourself to people outside your homes.
Yep, I think that's such an important lesson for all of us, whether we're dealing with, feeling down, depressed, having suicidal ideations, whatever it may be. I'm going to shift gears just slightly. So if somebody comes to you, and I know that we've talked on this a little bit, but what do you want our listeners to know then? If somebody does have the courage, as Adam did, to come forward and say that they are having suicidal thoughts, what should their reaction be? Because until I went through your training, I know that I would be like, I'm here for you, but I wouldn't know what to do. What would you be? What do you want our listeners to know in these situations? Like,
actually, simply put, Jeremiah, I say, wow, thank you for telling me that. That took a lot of courage. Thank you for trusting me. Let's talk about why suicide's on your mind today. What's going on? Once we know why suicide's on their mind, what their hurts are, that's the person we're going to connect them to. And then you'll say, wow, thank you for sharing that. Let's see if we can find someone who deals with alcohol, substance use. Let's see if we can get you to a grief therapist. Let's see if we can find someone who can help with addictions or gambling or just depression. So first, you have to be comfortable understanding why suicide came to their mind. Once they tell us why, that's going to help us connect them to that person that can decrease that pain and help with whatever's going on in their life. It's very simple to do, but it's being comfortable asking the question and sitting there for a moment to hear their reasonings why. And remember, it's their perception, not what you see. It's what they see and feel.
So I want to circle back to one piece that we've already talked a little bit about, but it's just so important, I feel, to once you start to have those conversations and you're concerned, it seemed almost, I don't want to say counterintuitive, but it was, at the time, I was like, there's a lot of apprehension for me if somebody is I'm concerned about them having suicidal thoughts to say, are you considering, you're talking about suicide and bringing up that conversation. So can you just reiterate why it's so important to actually bring those up? Because for me, I was apprehensive to like, am I going to put these thoughts in their head? But really.
Yeah, there's no studies that support that question of will it put a thought in their head. But Jeremiah, you would not be asking someone if they're talking about suicide unless there was something about their behavior, something that you heard them say, or something that they are doing. And if you ask, you're telling them, I cared enough to notice. And I care enough to ask. If you dismiss it, they get a message. If they're vulnerable, they're getting a message, in all honesty, that says he didn't even notice, he didn't care enough, and screw everybody. Like, this person is supposed to be my friend. And that's not to put guilt on people who've lost someone to suicide. That's just about, these are opportunities that we're going to miss if we don't get comfortable asking that question. Jeremiah, if somebody was having a heart attack, if you took CPR class, and you notice someone sweating and maybe, slurring their speech a little bit or shaking, you would say to them, hey man, what's going on? I've noticed you're slurring your speech, you're sweating, you're rubbing your arm. You would tell them everything that you noticed. You wouldn't just walk away. You would address their symptoms and then find out if it's related to a heart attack or maybe a death by any other means.
So I'm going to touch base now a little bit about the families. So if a family either has somebody they're worried about, what would be your recommendations to them? And then that's one part. And two, what if a family member has lost someone to suicide? What would your recommendations be to those individuals as well?
There's a group called NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. It's a national group. There's some excellent information on their website about how to be a support to someone who struggles with their mental health. They have a group called Families to Family. So it's a wonderful website that they can go to for information. Also, if a family member is concerned, making sure the individual goes into their primary care or connects them with some type of counseling. If someone does lose someone to suicide, and we do have an ongoing support group, we meet twice a month. It's called Survivors of Suicide Lost, and there are groups like that around the country. We also have a lost team, local outreach for survivors of suicide, and we meet up with families who are newly bereaved to suicide. And we really just sit with the families and offer hope and help navigate through the early hours and days of the death. Our support group meets twice a month. The people do have to call our network, and we will make sure that it's a good fit prior to them coming. People who lose someone to suicide oftentimes feel alone, but there's 48,000 people that die by suicide a year. There's about 1,400 in Michigan. So people aren't as alone as we think we are once we start having that conversation. And I have a brother that died from cancer, a brother-in-law that died in a car accident, and a brother that died from suicide. He's not any different in his cause of death. It's sad that he died, and I needed just as much help for both brothers.
Thank you so much for that, Barb. On the topics of family here, Adam, I'd love to learn more about how do you think your family and your children have been affected by you being more open and honest? Do you think it's really led to a positive changes? What do you think? How do you feel about how it's affected them?
I think it was a very positive change. I wasn't hiding something anymore, especially my wife and I's relationship. I think since going through this has only gotten stronger, which I am 100% thankful for. And I've put her through the ringer in our 10 years of marriage. So, but yeah, it's being honest is just opening up the conversation and opening up other people's perspectives of it. And when I first told my parents, I think they were a little taken aback. Like, I don't think they really knew how to react to it. But now, like, my dad will call me and be like, "Hey, how you doing? Good? You doing okay?" And he was here this past weekend, and I'm like, I talked to him. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm doing really good. Like, I gave him, like, I'm feeling good. I'm on this podcast. I got other stuff going on and everything. Like, no, I'm feeling. He's like, okay. He goes, if you need anything, you call me. I'm like, I got you. Thank you. So it's weird because, like, my dad, I never connected like that before. And now it's opening it up. Like, hey, I've gone through this. I want to talk about it. I'm willing to talk about it. And I don't know, it's helped everything. And that's what, if you listen in between all the words and the stuff we're saying right now, we're saying two things: talk about it and be truthful. That's it. It's as simple as that.
And it really shows that the love and support you have from your family members, from your dad, to maybe you didn't have that, like, as much of an open relationship, but that love is there. You can clearly see it, and I could hear, like, that they're concerned and want to check in with you, make sure. And even if they are asking that "how are you" question, right? Mm-hmm. So good.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, like, I will tell everyone, I was very lucky that I had my wife, my wife, Barb, and I had a really, really close friend that I was able to lean on a lot, that went through this kind of the same situation in ways. But if you don't have those people that you know of right away, I mean, call Barb and ask. There are people out there that are willing to help and willing to listen, and we will help you find them.
Absolutely. On that note, too, I want to just, as we start to close out today's, for those people who want to reach out then or want those resources, if someone is struggling or having these thoughts, where can they go, and what are some resources? I know that we've touched on this, but just to reiterate these for our listeners, anyone who is struggling.
I think there's two really important phone numbers, text. So 988 is the new number that's going to be released July 2022. And so instead of calling the 1-800-273-TALK, it'll work the same, but it's the 988. So it's the crisis or the lifeline around mental health and suicide. Anyone can call 988, and it'll connect you to a person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they don't call lights and siren. They don't do, you figure out how to talk it through and what your next step should be, and it's confidential. So 988 is a really important 3-digit number that anyone can call in the United States. The text line is 741-741, and you can just put "need to talk," thoughts of suicide, whatever you want to text in there, and that individual 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as well. So don't forget, those two numbers are 24 hours a day. Our connection number, our network is 989-781-5260. And we are the resource line. We're not a 24-hour crisis. I want people to know that. Our goal and our job is to connect you and have that conversation to help you decide where you might need to go next. And then also we do the aftercare. So I feel like and then mantherapy.org, if you have a male that just wants to take the self-assessment, to go ahead and check into that website. But there's so many people that care, Jeremiah. Start in your own phone, in your own home. Adam talked about it was hard to tell his dad. Finding that one person that can help you navigate, help give you that words and support to tell the people who can best support you in your own life. One of the events that we put on is called the Walk for Hope Depression Suicide Awareness Event. It is Sunday, August 7th, and it is Saginaw Valley State University. This is our 20th year. It's a wonderful event, family-friendly, untimed 5K walk run. We do encourage people to, if it's not this year that you can join us, look at next year, but this is our 20th Walk for Hope, bringing people together. Our goal is to have 1,500 to 2,000 people joining us to help bring this awareness to our community and to each other. So Adam hopefully will be our speaker this year, and along with some other guests. So please join us, and thank you guys, Jeremiah, Adam, for being here today.
Thank you so much. That's really important information, and we'll definitely have those resources posted for everyone. As we wrap up today, I guess my last question is going to be, what will be your final message to our listeners? Adam, I'll start off with you, I guess, on this one.
My final message would be talk and listen when people are talking to you. And it's okay not to be okay. I know it's something we hear, especially in culture now, is we hear it's okay not to be okay, but it truly is. It's not just a saying. If you're not feeling right and you know something's wrong, talk about it. And I want to leave you with a quote that I found on a Netflix special from Marty Fish. I don't know if you know who Marty Fish is. He's a tennis pro who used to be like number 1 or 2 ranked in the world way back in like the early 2000s. And he was battling depression. And one day his wife told him, he's like, you don't have to do this. And he's like, you're right. And he walked away from like Wimbledon. Yeah. And his quote was, it's a daily battle, but I win every day. And I live by that. It's take it one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, and just win every little battle. Don't look at it as a huge option or a huge war. Take it little by little, and you will be okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you. Barb, what would be your final thoughts for our listeners today as well?
2 things. To make sure that you don't feel like you have to tough this out alone. There's no shame in asking for help. We all need a little help from a friend, as that song goes. Some of us need a little more, but no one should be struggling with life alone. There's people who care and are willing to help. You just have to be the one to make that first call, and people will be willing. And if it's not the first person, try a second.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Barb. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here today, for sharing your stories, sharing your expertise. And I know that I've learned a lot today. I know our listeners will as well. And I hope that it positively impacts people who may be struggling as well. So thank you.
You can stay connected with the Visibility Project by subscribing, liking, and sharing on your favorite podcasting and social apps. Look for us at the Visibility PRJ.
Financial support is needed to keep the conversation going. Go to midlandfoundation.org/give and select the Cultural Awareness Coalition Endowment Fund to be part of the project. Note podcast in your donation notes.
Thank you for listening.
We see you.
We hear you.
And together, we are making a difference.